it all boils down to the data. And the data, needs to be clean. It needs to have bias removed. It needs to be compliant. There's so many things that are required for generative AI to actually work to its fullest. It all starts with data, which leads to data modernization.
Welcome to the Agile Digital Transformation Podcast, where we explore different aspects of digital transformation and digital experience with your host, Tim Butera, Content and Community Manager at AgileDrop.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Our guest today is Tony Bailey, industry leader with over 25 years of experience in cloud and hybrid go-to-market strategies, SaaS sales and marketing, scaling sales organizations, and acquisition integration. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of modernizing legacy apps and legacy infrastructure. Tony, welcome to the show. It's great having you here today. Want to add anything before we jump in?
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you having me on. Look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So the first thing that we need to discuss to kind of set the stage is obviously, why is it so important to modernize these legacy apps or legacy infrastructure?
I think the list is long, but I think if you break it down to a few key things, I think there's security and compliance. I think security is at the core of everything that we have to do today. There's a lot of bad actors that are trying to do all kinds of bad things to us every day. So I think when you're creating your strategy for the future, I think you start with security. So I'll say security and compliance, because you have to meet the regulatory needs with anything that you're going to do. Mm-hmm. I think with data modernization, you also have the ability to leverage efficiencies. So I think a lot of legacy data centers and such, they tend to get more and more expensive over time. They tend to become more unreliable over time. And, obviously the cloud is getting literally hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in there. It's not going anywhere, and it's a very effective platform for most. I think the last piece is scalability and agility. I think by allowing the data modernization to occur, it allows you to open up the insights of that data in ways that are not difficult, if not impossible, in the legacy environments of today, to bring them all together and provide those insights through machine learning or AI or generative AI. I think there's a requirement to move to data modernization or take advantage of that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that probably it's even more important now with AI being all over the place.
Yeah, I think that, it's funny because it's like the hottest topic in the world, right? I mean, generative AI is going to solve this. It's going to erase all the jobs. It has pros and cons, obviously, in the arguments that are made. But I think, at the end of the day, it's an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I think in order to take advantage of the promise that generative AI could bring to us, it all boils down to the data. And the data, needs to be clean. It needs to be have bias removed. It needs to be compliant. There's so many things that are required for generative AI to actually work to its fullest. It all starts with data, which leads to data modernization, obviously.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that it's not just AI. It's basically anything to do with the digital has to have really on point, responsible, well put together, efficient like data usage and how data is handled, avoiding stuff like data silos, stuff like that.
That's right. And legacy environments are full of mm-hmm. silos and full of unstructured data that could be all over the place. And so it requires a thoughtful exercise to bring it together and leverage the power that's in the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. So obviously AI is like one major case where this is particularly important. Are there any other important cases or like sectors where this modernization is particularly important that we should mention here?
Well, I think it applies across. I think, mm-hmm. At InterVision, we service clients in the commercial side as well as public sector. And I think they have different, challenges or opportunities. It depends, again, how you look at it. Public sector tends to be much more regulated, but on the commercial side, things like financial services and healthcare obviously are heavily regulated as well. So I think both of those bring a compliance requirement that is becoming much more stringent, and the penalties can be severe, right? Mm-hmm. If you're not compliant with protecting my private information, you could have monetary fines. It could have brand impact. It could lead to loss of revenues. I mean, there's all kinds of implications that go with it in those regulated areas.
So what are some strategies and best practices for modernization?
Well, I think as I alluded to earlier, I think there's a bit of a, start with a thoughtful process that you're going to go through. What's the data that's necessary? What systems do you want to put forward first? I think you want to start simply. I don't think you want to, boil the ocean. I think you want to take some baby steps and take some, less important applications or less important data and do the process so that you become more confident and competent in those areas. But, there's the data cleanliness, there's the actual data migration to the cloud. There's things like storage optimization because, as you move the data to the cloud, it can quickly become very expensive. So you want to make sure that you have parameters and guidelines that help make it optimized based on the type of data you have. The quality improvement and the ability to leverage that data for analytics. Again, I'm not necessarily saying generative AI. I'm just talking about analytics in general. The ability to look at the data, the combined data in a new light can shed new insights that will likely be very actionable in the process.
Obviously, like the cost of data you mentioned, right, that it can get very expensive. So that's I see that as one obvious challenge here. So what would be some other main challenges to keep in mind and to consider and to kind of plan for in this context?
Well, I think it comes back to the desire to get help. I
Hmm.
think that, to take somebody that's been managing an on-premise data center and been managing a specific application for the last 10, 20 years and ask them to be experts at moving the data to the cloud, to be experts at modernizing the applications to leverage the cloud is a tall order. And I think there are companies like InterVision that have years and years of experience in helping do discovery to understand the needs of the customer, create the white glove escort plan, and then have key metrics at the back end to show that we've actually met the intention of that modernization project.
Do you maybe have any examples like from your own work or like any interesting stories, maybe both of how things were really smooth and how things were really successful with these initiatives, and maybe also an example of a case where it wasn't so smooth, where you had to do maybe a lot of thinking, a lot of reworking, a lot of back and forth and stuff like that. That would be interesting to know.
I've got probably two examples. One on the
Mhm.
public sector side, a large utility had been around for decades and had just slew of documents,
Mhm.
whether they were PDFs or Word documents or, whatever format they were in. They just had a slew of documentation and they wanted to bring it together and be able to present information to their customers and to the regulatory departments in a efficient way as opposed to searching through literally millions of documents to get to the right answer. They wanted to bring this all together through a modernization exercise and make that available. And we did a phased approach. Phase one took, maybe 3 months, and the results were great. We moved into phase two, which is a much bigger subset of the information that's available to them. So I think, on the regulatory side, taking, very disparate and sometimes decades old information and bringing that to light and to bear is, I would say is the definition of data modernization.
Mhm.
On the flip side, and kind of an interesting use case, we had a client that takes in videos and takes in thousands and thousands of videos a day, and they have a requirement to do grading, the PG-13, rated R, PG, those requirements had to be put on those videos that were coming in. But the volume of the videos coming in was so great that they couldn't meet it with manpower. They
Mhm.
wanted to create an opportunity to take the video in, on one hand, look at the audio and grade the audio to understand, the words that are being spoken in the video, as well as the video element. They wanted to analyze the video components to see what was being shown on the screen. And so taking, literally thousands and thousands of videos and running through this process to make sure that it was following their outcome is another example. It's kind of an interesting use case to me that you can grade videos in without people taking a look.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've had probably stories of like, not just in this case, but I did this made me think of it, of like claims of something being done with AI, like video processing, but then actually there's a lot of manual work involved also. But so I'm guessing that you actually made it work, that it was actually done, only in an automated way.
That's right. Well, I'm sure there are outliers that if it was a little iffy or a definitive answer, then it probably still requires a
Mhm.
person to take a look. But the vast majority is being done in an automated fashion.
But yeah, that's probably how it's supposed to be with automation, right? I mean, even if you
That's
automate
exactly.
everything, you have to have at least someone, doing like the kind of fringe checks, I guess.
Yes, there has to be a quality assurance piece in there somewhere. Yes.
And especially when it comes to AI, there's this term human in the loop, which, at times might be a little bit of a buzzword, but I guess, it's a buzzword for good reason because it is effective at conveying exactly what you wanted to convey, and it also applies here very heavily.
And I don't think it goes away. I mean, I think
Mhm.
those guardrails have to be in place in the process. So they have to constantly be monitoring. And it goes back to things like data bias and all of that stuff. You have to keep course correcting to make sure it's staying in the truth lane.
Hmm. Yeah, very good point. And so since we already started talking about the human aspect a bit more in addition to the tech and the very heavy data aspects, I'm wondering like about the people culture side, what are some of the most important things, important changes here in terms of like culture, management? Because obviously if we're talking about something legacy, there might be resistance, there might be, especially on depending on the size of the organization, there might be a lot of like challenges on the people side as well.
Yeah, I think change management, I mean, this is something that's been going on forever, right? I think
Mhm.
change management is critical. And the way that we approach change management is, it starts at the top down. If the top is not convinced that they should be a part of this project and they're not being held accountable to the project, I think that's the first failure. I think the second point is how do you upskill your existing resources? And that upskill process is a process. It is not everyone that's been around for 35 years is going to suddenly become, a data modernization
Mhm.
expert or a generative AI expert without significant training. And so you have to build that into the process. I think how things were done and how they could be done are very different animals. And if you're going to do it thoughtfully, there are certain aspects of your business that you want to be managing with your internal resources, but it also opens up the opportunity to leverage experts in the field as, added value to the process and potentially running it in the long run for you. Because, sometimes there are relatively low level or easier to do tasks that if you take your high expensive resources internally and have them doing relatively menial tasks, you're mismatched on the
Mhm.
skill set. So oftentimes we see companies will outsource the lower level and focus their resources on the more strategic elements of the business.
Mhm.
And so I think, it's not one size fits all. I think each individual customer has a different need and a different journey, but change management and upskilling are probably the two critical elements to the and I would also say a culture of innovation is also
Mhm.
important, right? I think you have to we're not going to be the company of old, we're going to be the company of tomorrow. And you have to foster that belief that innovation is good. It's going to lead to better customer outcomes. It's going to lead to better employee satisfaction. It's going to lead to better revenues or whatever the outcome of the organization's innovation move is.
Yeah, and it's all connected, right? Because this innovation-driven culture should kind of be promoted and fostered top down, as you mentioned before, and it's basically just a part of the whole change management thing.
That's exactly right.
And I'm also wondering, since you manage the outsourcing, I'm wondering two questions here. The first is, are there any extra considerations with outsourcing when it comes to stuff like security?
Well, first, I would, make sure that this is not the first time they've done it. All
Hmm.
right. Because I do think a lot of people have things on their website that says we're experts at this, but if you don't have references and similar industry, similar size, similar challenges, and someone can say, let me talk to those customers. I think you have to validate first. I think the other piece is you have to have a clear set of KPIs. What does success look like? So you can't just say, I want you to move this application to the cloud. That's 10 years ago, right? It's I'm going to move it and I'm going to drop costs and I'm going to increase customer experience. I'm going to generate this much revenue. I'm going to retain more employees. Whatever those metrics are, have a hard and fast KPI set and hold them to it. And if along the way they're not providing that white glove escort, they're not delivering on the KPIs, you have to find alternatives. You don't just ride it into the ground. You got to keep managing it and staying on top of it. And that's, I think, part of the change management. It's not just change management of the employees of the organization, it's change management of the project team to that happy place in the destination.
Yeah, that was well said. And the second question here, maybe not necessarily restricted to outsourcing modernization related stuff, but just outsourcing in general. Interested in your thoughts on how, the prevalence of AI being able to do more and more, how that will impact companies outsourcing, meaning will they be inclined to rather than outsource, trust more and more of these menial tasks to AI instead of outsourcing? Or will there be stuff like maybe, outsourcing the whole AI thing, the whole AI aspect to an external partner?
That's a tough one. I think it's going to depend a lot on company size and appetite for risk. I think, the market that we serve is the upper SMB and lower enterprise. And I think in that group, they're going to leverage third-party experts more than, say, the Fortune 500 or the Global 1000. I think they have a lot more resources, and therefore they'll probably do more of it themselves internally. But I think in the near term, the thing that I see that's working is employee productivity gains through tools like Microsoft Copilot or Amazon Q is a augmentation to make you better and more effective as an employee. But in the long run, it's going to do a lot more. It's going to help, design new products and do all kinds of revenue optimization and next best actions and all these different things. I think a lot of that is going to be automated and it won't require as many either internal or external resources to help in those areas.
Well, thanks so much for the great conversation, Tony. I really enjoyed your insights, and I'm glad that we kind of expanded it a little bit into some sub areas that we didn't really plan on discussing, but I think that we delivered a lot of value to anybody listening right now. And I hope that both of us also really enjoyed it. Just for anybody listening right now who maybe want to learn more about you or maybe get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, InterVision.com is the website, and in there is a multitude of areas. We tend to focus in 4 centers of excellence. We have a cloud center of excellence, a cybersecurity, workforce modernization, and modern infrastructure. Those are the 4 areas that we have a very deep capability in. And as I said, we service the upper SMB and lower enterprise. And I think in that area, there is a skill gap. There is a lot of need, open positions. And so they could either fight to try and retain those employees themselves, or they could leverage experts that have been there, done that, and likely in a more cost-effective way than trying to find the unicorn out there to help you with a particular space. So please visit intervision.com. Again, I'm Tony Bailey. I'm the EVP here. And email is tbailey@intervision.com if you'd like to reach out.
Awesome. We'll make sure to also include everything in the show notes. And Tony, thank you again so much for your time, for your insights. It was really great chatting with you today.
Tim, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
And well, to our listeners, that's all for this episode. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to check out our other episodes, you can find all of them at agiledrop.com/podcast, as well as on all the most popular podcasting platforms. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes, and don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and colleagues.